Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on how to recruit and retain veteran talent. My name is Nina. I'm one of the marketing coordinators over at Glassdoor, and I will be your moderator for the day. So a couple of webinar tips for attendees before we get started. You can connect to audio using your computer's microphone and speakers, or you may select Use Telephone after joining the webinar. All lines will be muted to avoid background noise, but you can ask questions at any time by typing them into the question pane you see on your right-hand side. To be mindful of everybody's time, we will save all Q&A towards the end of the presentation, but please feel free to submit those questions whenever you have them. I'd like to invite you all to join the conversation with us socially using the hashtag GDChat, as we will be live tweeting throughout the presentation. And now I'd like to introduce our amazing speakers for the day. First, we have Guzman, who is the Global Head of Military Programs and Veteran Affairs at Verizon. We also have Logan Halliwell, who is the Military Programs and Partnership Manager at Simplilearn, and then our very own Leanne Farley, who is the Global HR Operations Leader here at Glassdoor. So Leanne, I will pass it to you and let you take it away for us.
Thank you, Nina. So what are we going to talk about today? A quick look at the agenda. We're going to talk about candidates' decisions today, the new funnel of hiring, take a quick look inside the veteran's mind, some best practices for attracting and ramping veterans in our organizations. We're going to hand it over to Verizon for our conversation spotlight, and then we're going to do some key takeaways for today as well. So, it's probably no surprise to anyone joining us today that the days of blindly applying for a job are long gone. Today's candidates treat their job search as a critical decision, one where they rely on reviews, research, referrals before they make a decision on where they want to work and how they want to work. This means that the job search experience has also changed. We don't make big purchases today without doing our research. We go online to research before we buy. We have sites like Google, Amazon, TripAdvisor, everything we do from taking a trip to buying a TV. Data shows us that 81% of shoppers all conduct research online before buying, and 7 in 10 buyers seek out reviews before purchasing. Even for relatively insignificant decisions, we do a lot of research first. We go to at least 3 websites, is what the research shows us. We think about the kind of research that we do before making an incredibly important life decision, a decision like choosing a job. On average today, job seekers use around 18 sources and look at 7 to 8 reviews to research before applying for the job. Job seekers want to know and understand critical information about a company before they apply, before they interview, or before they accept that job offer. They want to know what it's really like to work for a company. They want to get a feel for the culture, who are the leadership team and how do they work, what are the career advancement opportunities, and only then, after their research, will they apply or accept an offer. Similarly, consumers want to know what kind of company you are when they choose to spend money with you. They want to know how you treat your employees and are you a reputable organization before they'll do business with you. Both job seekers and consumers are consulting a variety of sources today that provide context to their search. We have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and of course Glassdoor that help us to do this research. So you as an organization need to be involved in those conversations going on where job seekers and consumers are looking at your company. Job seekers want to hear everyone's perspective. Candidates have high expectations. Sorry, technical difficulty on my side. There's a wealth of information out there on the internet, job boards, professional networks, social media. Candidates have set very high expectations. The types of sources that they're looking at do include friends and family, but also include hearing directly from employees themselves. What's it really like inside the walls of your organization? Although friends and families are still the most trusted source of this information, approximately 72% of people rely on this, content provided by employees is the #2 most trusted source of information on a company. While candidates don't demand perfection, they do want and expect a level of transparency and authenticity from employers. We know from Glassdoor Research that 90% say that they want to work for a company that embraces transparency. So it's critical to your hiring success as an organization that you embrace this. So naturally, hiring great candidates becomes a little bit more difficult. The time it takes to recruit has nearly doubled in the last 5 years. What may have previously taken just a couple of weeks is now likely to take closer to a month and upwards of 3 or 6 months for some harder to fill roles. That's because job seekers today want more than just a job. Companies are selling a brand, a lifestyle, a community, and a culture that a candidate should want to be a part of and identify with on a personal level. Candidates take a lot of factors into account before they accept a job. Research shows us that the top 5 factors that candidates consider before accepting a job offer are salary and compensation, career growth opportunities, work-life balance, location and commute, and company culture and values. However, while salary and compensation are very important and are a factor in consideration, they're not the main driver to satisfaction for candidates. The most important factors that influence satisfaction are culture and values, career advancement opportunities, and the opinion of senior leadership. So what does this mean to you as an employer? It means that candidates care about these things more than they used to, which is why hiring has become fundamentally more difficult, especially when it comes to hiring candidates with non-traditional backgrounds and creating a new funnel of hiring. So for the purpose of today's conversation, the new funnel of hiring that we'll be discussing is veterans. How to find your pool of veteran talent, how to engage with them, and ultimately how to ramp them and retain them within your organization. Veteran candidates, there's a true value to veteran candidates that is not always obvious. In today's world, what we're seeing is that companies are typically doing the bare minimum when it comes to diversity and veteran hiring. Too many employers are in the mindset that they're just checking a box when it comes to veterans, doing a few small, simple things such as a blurb on their career site or posting a few relevant photos. But that's not enough. Hiring and recruiting veterans may not be something that always comes to mind when hiring managers and recruiters are looking to fill a role with the right candidate. This is because veterans aren't always at the top of a recruiter's mind. People don't fully understand their military background. How do they relate to your job and your company? Maybe don't understand the skills and training and how they can truly benefit their organization. The reality is that when it comes down to it, you're doing yourself a huge disservice because you're missing out on the true value of these valued candidates. In the hiring and recruiting process, it's very easy to stick to what you know, aka profiles that you're comfortable with rather than looking at those that may require a little bit more understanding and attention. Many recruiters will take the path of least resistance, and when it comes to choosing a candidate pool to select from, it's much easier to sort through 100 resumes of applicants who have recognizable corporate or business-to-business experience as opposed to military field experience. But it's really important to not let this thinking get in the way of recruiting strategies, because we all must realize the obvious benefits that veterans can provide to an organization and capitalize on these skilled individuals. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about hiring veterans. Thoughts that range from them not being good workers, struggle to fit in culturally. Veterans, however, have many skill sets that may not seem like a direct business skill, but still make them a valuable member of your workforce. For example, perseverance, team-oriented, they're disciplined, they show leadership and respond to leadership, and stamina. In terms of perseverance, in today's recruiting landscape, we all need to be perseverant, which also happens to be one of the core traits of a veteran. something that is drilled into them from day one. When employees have so many tasks and insane deadlines, veterans will offer key skills such as knowing how to manage expectations and not quitting until a task is accomplished, which is a huge asset to any startup or a global organization. Veterans are team-oriented. A lot of companies may look to hire athletes or candidates with sports backgrounds, and hiring veterans here is no different. Both pools of candidates possess the same skill set in that they've both worked in team environments. They have a deep understanding of what it's like to work in a team environment. Teamwork is a vital skill at every company, and it's a skill that's hard to teach. The level of teamwork that veterans bring to the table is invaluable. Teamwork is what they live and breathe. Disciplined. Veterans are also incredibly disciplined. They have a strong ability to both give and receive direction. They know how to multitask, how to prioritize, because they've been in situations where their lives depend on the decision that they make. This type of discipline and knowing how to follow orders while carrying out objectives is something that every company can benefit from. Leadership. Hiring candidates with leadership qualities is one of the most important things to many companies, and veterans have just that. They know how to lead by example. They can be an integral part of your team by having a simple yet hard to find skill set. Veterans also have an extremely high level of stamina. They have an incredible ability to get through tough situations and easily manage day-to-day stresses, which are qualities that can help your team to the next level while encouraging everyone to work harder and stronger. At the end of the day, it's important to hire the best candidate for any role. While veterans have a unique background, it's important to actually understand what they can bring to the table, as well as understand the actual tasks that these veterans have completed and how those qualities can complement your open roles. You may find that they can add an invaluable perspective to your team. While veterans might not immediately know what job titles best suit them, their skill set translates to adding value in the workplace. And now we're going to hand over to Evan, who's going to talk to us a little bit about experience hiring veterans and the business case around this as well.
Hi, thank you so much. This is Evan Guzman, Verizon. So, all the points that Leanne just shared are pretty much spot on in terms of the value that service members do bring, and that military experience really does matter. But even when I started the program at Verizon, realized that there's actually more to it than that. But what you often hear a lot is, supporting our military is good for business, but what does that really mean? So I wanted to bring out some important stats that I researched and decided that, these are important pieces of information that you should know about, because when you talk about making the business case, you also have to tie it back to the business. And I think it's important to note when you look at these stats that 94% of the U.S. population, puts our military in the highest regard in terms of trust. From our perspective at Verizon, it's all about consumer engagement. So when we realized that 88% of consumers believe that companies should support our military community and causes, that sort of gave us a hint that, not only are they good for our business to hire them, but there's also an opportunity for us as a business to reach out to service members in a way that actually positions Verizon in a very favorable, in a very favorable light. And 87% of these consumers, they themselves say they should support the military community and causes, which would include brands that support the military. Now, it's important to include this in a business case in addition to what Leanne shared, because now you're sort of widening the scope of the value that it brings to the business beyond the hire. So top leadership, they need to see the direct business impact, and you can use these stats to validate. And the other thing is, in a competitive market like ours, every advantage counts. So when we realize that there's an opportunity here to recruit top talent, but there's also an opportunity for us to step in and lead in and really this opportunity to be seen as an employer that not only supports the military, but we're really entrenched and engaged in making sure that we support the military in various ways, and I'll share a little bit more on that shortly. Next slide, please. So we're going to get a little bit inside the veteran's mind, because in my engagements and my team, when we have our huddles and talk, we share varying levels of experiences when we talk to people, and there are three things on the top of service members, especially those in transition, and that is employment, education, and entrepreneurship. So let me talk a little bit about employment. So in another research pulled by, I believe it was the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, they say that 55% of service members who are transitioning out are looking for a different career than what they did in the military. And that's good to know, because if you are looking to engage in connecting with service members, it's important to know what you might encounter in speaking with them. And they ask really good questions. What are the companies that are best for me? I'm not really sure what I want to do yet. This is that critical point and opportunity in which you're engaging to have this conversation. So you're almost like a mentor at the very beginning of the discussions. So what we tell service members that if 55% of those that are leaving the military are looking for a different career than what they did in the military, we need to have a frank conversation with them. And we've had this in the past. I actually spoke to someone who had 10 years of logistics and supply chain and wanted to pursue a career out of the military in marketing. Now, as challenging as it already is, even with someone with experience, can you imagine having to start from scratch and compounding the challenges by switching into another area? So a lot of the advice we give is work from strength. I would recommend consider a career with a big organization that will allow you to, put that military experience to work in the private sector or in corporation, and then from there begin to look at other opportunities that would be of more interest. So when you speak to a service member, everyone can offer different advice, but the important thing to understand is they may not exactly know what they want to do, so you actually have to help them. So, and that's, again, covering the employment side. I'm actually oversimplifying it, but the truth is, this is exactly what you could expect to encounter when you are speaking with people transitioning out of the military. And even those that have been out a few years, they're still trying to figure it out too. Next slide, please. Education. This is a big one. So what industries pay better? What would be the best degree to pursue? And is there opportunity for growth in this industry, right? We may not know all the answers to this, but what's important is to help guide the person that you're speaking with, whoever this person is. And if you think your business would be of value, then pitch your business. If you're not the right industry or business that is of interest to this service member, be honest. We do. We don't necessarily turn people away, but based on the feedback we get, we realize, all right, maybe you should pursue a degree in something you enjoy, which is, information technology. That's actually a pretty good field to get into. So you're offering your best advice based on your own experiences, because we've all been there. I mean, whether you served or not, from an education perspective, how many of us actually pursued a degree that we actually use in our jobs today? Not many. Right? I took a communications degree, so it's pretty general, but the reality is service members are really trying to find their way into understanding, what's a good career path? I want to take advantage of my GI Bill. What could I do? And we try to see them in the right direction. They may come back to you, they may not. But the point is that if you want to be a military-friendly employer or a brand, you have to be willing to step out of just recruiting them for yourselves and actually help them in really finding out where they want to go and what they want to do. Next slide, please. All right, entrepreneurship. I love this one because, I know a lot of service members, when they talk to me and they reach out as members of my team, I want to do something with entrepreneurship. They're just not really sure what that is. Is it a franchise? Is it starting your own business from scratch? What do you want to get into? Well, I'm not really sure yet. Well, the other thing I have on my mind is where would I go get some help? And there are resources that help individuals who want to pursue sort of a business that they want to start. But can I succeed in the civilian market? Well, in some studies that I've read, I heard, and I was looking for the source and couldn't pinpoint it, but I believe there's information out there that tells the information is that veterans have a higher success rate than non-veterans when it comes to entrepreneurship. So, I find that to be true. In fact, I'm an entrepreneur, came to work at Verizon. And what I found that was so compelling was I was actually able to think like an entrepreneur, be creative, come up with concepts and ideas that were a little bit different than the norm. And I've been able to really work with leadership to build a really good platform here at Verizon in engaging with the military community. So if anyone is an entrepreneur or wants to be, and they connect with you, the best advice you can give them is, well, our company can offer you opportunity to increase your experience, to increase your opportunities to better engage, learn a business, learn to honing your skills, because as an entrepreneur, and I know Leanne said earlier, they're very focused, they're dedicated, they have great stamina, and this is probably why service members tend to have a higher degree of success in entrepreneurship. But if you get someone who is thinking of entrepreneurship, that's a good conversation to have and say, hey, have you ever thought about working at Verizon in IT, sort of build up a couple of years under your belt before you actually venture out? Because starting a business is not as easy as people think. It sounds great because you can set up your own hours and do whatever, but the reality is you have to be ready. You have to have, some staying power, because it can get very tough. But service members may not know this, but if you have experience that lends itself into helping them make these informed decisions, then I would highly recommend having these conversations, because in the end, you're really helping the service member beyond just looking to them to hire them directly. Next slide. Okay, so this next session goes to one of our colleagues. He's going to cover best practices for attracting and ramping veterans. I believe he's on the line.
Yes, sir. This is Logan Halliwell over at Simplilearn, and I'd like to pick up kind of the concept of entrepreneurship that Evan just left off with. Throughout a veteran's career, as they progress, past the 4-year mark, past the 8-year mark, the 16-year mark, maybe looking at the full career and retiring, they somewhat own projects, they own things, and that's kind of where that entrepreneurial piece occurs. They're accountable for their teams, they're accountable for the orders and mission accomplishment, and really understanding and that kind of drive and motivation and how you can align that to your business goals is how you should think about how to find and recruit veteran talent. It starts off with learning a little bit about veteran personas. Who are you actually looking for? You want to know, are we looking for, do I have a mid-level manager position that I want to look for that I can train for, or is there a specific skill set that I need to fill, and where is that in kind of the whole military ecosystem? So you're going to need to spend some time learning a little bit about the different branches, about the different jobs, what a typical career progression looks like, geographically where everything's located. But we want to really drill in and find out, one, learn about the veteran ecosystem, and two, kind of identify what are good fits. Good ways to start are looking internally to your organization and seeing if you have any veterans on your team. You can do an informal poll, you can ask them to self-identify, and then you can take a step back and say, hey, what was your military experience? And you can learn about what you have on hand. At that same time, you're also identifying what you have on hand right now. And from there, you would want to identify what you would want to look and replace with or target for your pipeline, and where would those folks be located by job title, by geography, etc. The next step is aligning those veteran pathways. And one thing I think you're noticing here in this dialogue and discussion is that there's a lot of structure in a veteran career that they're comfortable with, but having that structure, the ability to take command and give direction both upwards and downwards in any organization, that structure and understanding it is something that can be a real force multiplier for you and your organization. And you just need to figure out, how do I communicate that to that veteran, and how do I present them with that structure? Because you got to think of it from their mindset. They live structured environments for at least 4 years, if not 20. And if you can communicate that to them earlier, in the same way that you would educate your typical candidate on company values, etc., what job roles and responsibilities you become a coach and mentor, and you kind of think of a veteran when he's going through his transition as being in a dark tunnel, and you got to build that light at the end of the tunnel to get through transition. But then they're in this hallway, and you got to build, or at least have a concept to deliver to them as they're walking down this career. Build windows into it. What can I see in a larger organization? Is there other paths that I want to be on, and where are those doorways? And if you communicate that or kind of consider that as you're building your program in a way that makes sense to the veteran, you're courting them, and you're acting as that mentor and coach, and you're going to have a much stronger retention rate. And you want to think about retention while you're aligning these programs. There's a recent Merck study that came out, I think, with Hiring Our Heroes, and they noticed that at the year 2 and year 3 mark is where you really start seeing a lot of value displayed in your veteran hires. Once they can really grab into a company culture, can really understand it, they start really shining. And that conversation starts with how you think about how you align that structure, and how you express that structure to the veteran during the hiring process. The next piece on that, this kind of goes hand in glove here, is you want to identify what is your company's kind of veteran IQ, if it were. Where are we at right now? Do our hiring managers understand all these different veteran personas? Do they understand where the appropriate place to hire is, how to communicate with them, how to mentor, how to coach? Again, as Evan said, when we start talking about building veteran programs in kind of the greater veteran talent space, it's more of a team play. And if it's not a right fit with your organization, you want to find that out, and you want to have a nice, frank, candid conversation, and then help them out and point them in the right direction. Because what we talked about earlier with, most candidates using review, research, referral as a primary means of whether or not they're going to select a job role. Veterans, their peer-to-peer referral networks are extremely strong in veteran communities. And if you become a company that's known for doing the right thing and being a valued mentor, a valued coach, those conversations will typically result in being handed off referrals more so than you would normally experience in other candidate pools. And again, the structure to accept veteran talent is what we've just covered. The next step is we've identified kind of who we want to go after. We've identified where we would go after them. We've looked internally and said, hey, do we have a structure? Do we have a plan in place to communicate our company value? Communicate, what structure a veteran can expect when they arrive. We would need to figure out how to engage. And when we engage, we want to engage at a national, regional, and local level. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of organizations out there for scope at the national side where we can fill some of that pipeline at scale. So you're Hiring Our Heroes. There's all sorts of assets in there. Your professional veteran associations. There's a ton of them by branch, by service, by job. Then we have regional. That would be more of a geographic piece with individual bases. Or if you have a regional need, you would want to identify where those local chapters were, or where those local assets would be. And then when we get to local, that's more, you're looking at more at kind of a component level. You're trying to get to where your program is actually the tires hitting the road. Where is my local hiring managers going to go and meet them, and how are they going to interact with those on the ground local networks? But you want to have a holistic approach to it. And then when we engage, we're looking at the type of candidates being your veteran who has already transitioned, your active duty who's looking at transitioning, and anywhere you're going to find any of those personas, you're going to have your military spouse persona. And when we talk about veterans, we always want to consider military spouses as valuable candidate pools. On timelines, when we start looking at a 3 to 6 month hire for a position, right now studies are coming out that are saying veterans are performing best when they're transitioning, which means not retiring. At 12 months out, they need to be starting to look at that conversation. And when they're retiring, they want to be looking 24 months out. So the more you can penetrate those local networks and start selling and educating these transitioning veterans on your company, it's a much longer cycle, but you're becoming that trusted advisor for those veterans in career, choosing their new careers. Next slide, please. So when we understand that veteran journey, each individual is going to have a certain rank. Rank is typically associated with progressively more leadership and responsibilities. Oftentimes, up until the non-commissioned officer level, it's associated just with rank, with time and grade. And time, what that means is time spent in a specific service. MOS, if you see it, is a military occupational specialty. That's basically their job. So whatever they're trained for. And then a billet is kind of the role they're filling. So while they may have a certain rank and a certain MOS, there may be a handful of billets that they may be serving in, and that billet is going to be, think of it like a business unit at a military unit. They might have the exact same trained person at a certain point in their career, but they might be using him one way, whereas in another unit they might be using him a different way. That's what a billet is. When we start looking at training, there's two pieces to it. There's the professional military education, which is loosely associated with rank, and that's going to be your administrative and logistics courses, how to handle and how to lead teams, how to handle the administrative side of teams. If I'm a squad leader in an infantry unit and I'm managing 12 folks, I need to understand how do I handle their paid time off, how do I handle the slew of administrative tasks. That's kind of, think of it like a leadership academy at different ranks, at different points in their career. The occupational specialty is going to be for skill training. So if you have a specialty skill to get to your job, that's where you would use this MOS training. And typically it's going to be formal. It's going to be structured. It's going to be 40 to 80 hours typically. Sometimes you'll see a lot more. But you're going to have a 2 to 4 week period where they're in school, and at the end of it there's a proficiency exam, there's a defined outcome, and then they're going to be held accountable to that skill set. So when they go through those kind of high impact trainings, they get handed that knowledge, they walk away with it. They're being held accountable for those expected competencies that they're delivering it. So understanding how they learn, basically military folks are very much trained to learn quickly and then be held accountable to whatever that learning or training was. Understanding that is key when you're building out that pipeline, because that means you can have a candidate who may fit everything but that hard skill. Well, we can fix the skill if we're recruiting for culture. On the motivation side, again, this kind of gets into that entrepreneurship aspect, but mission accomplishment is very important to teams, and defined outcomes and achievable goals. So when you task them with something, they kind of own that project, or that team owns that project. It gets delegated down. That's what they're used to. But everybody at some point in that organization owns something. So if you can figure out roles that meet that kind of ownership, harnessing that to providing one for their team, but also leading a successful team is a powerful thing. And again, for each organization, it's going to be different, and that's kind of where you have to take a look and say, hey, does this fit with who I'm looking to hire for? Does this fit with our larger organizational culture? Another piece that I'd like to mention on this motivation piece is we often hear about servant leadership, and that's where you see a lot of military leadership is, if my troops aren't happy, then my goals aren't getting accomplished. So how do I get my troops happy within guideline, within scope? And that's pretty much the military version of servant leadership. So most of your NCO corps, that's another buzzword you're going to want to look out for, is non-commissioned officers. That's your mid-level managers where they're managing teams. But most of your NCOs are at least passing familiarity, if not expert, with servant leadership and accountability, kind of from that perspective. Next slide, please. So we want to define our veteran candidate persona. We want to know, again, kind of, are we targeting leadership or are we targeting skill sets? And then we want to know, if we're targeting leadership, what training requirements do I need to make that leadership hit the ground running effectively? And this ties into kind of that military learning and understanding kind of what that military learning is. Because if I see on a resume that someone's got a sergeant's course, well, one, we need to understand what sergeant's course actually is from our recruiting standpoint. We need to educate our team so that our veteran IQ is increased. But if I've got someone with a formal leadership and I know that they manage units of 12 to 40 people, well, hey, that's a pretty valuable skill set. If I take a little bit of time to learn about that and I teach my team to learn about that and be aware of it, I can then align that leadership training to, say, a job role or billet in my organization that has, a lower barrier to entry. Instead of from a hard skills perspective, if I'm just managing folks and I can train them up in a three-month period, I'll have a candidate that has had experience managing 40 people. We only start them off with 4, but that's where that 2 to 3 year value of that veteran starts to shine, is because all of a sudden, once he becomes up to speed on the company's not culture but skills, and he's a fit with that culture, they're really going to start hitting the ground running, because I can scale that person up much more quickly at that 2 to 3 year mark once we've got them on board. On managing expectations, basically, as Evan mentioned, you're setting your conversations up to be kind of as your career coach. Your recruiters need to listen to what the veteran's saying and help them build those lights at the end of the tunnel. Help them through that transition and kind of become peer mentorship, whatever it is. Do the right thing. Figure out what's right. What's the right fit for that individual. You then, as a company, become a trusted resource. A lot of veterans don't know what's on the outside. They don't know what they don't know. And so managing expectations is key in that, hey, you're going to spend a year or two in this role, but then you can move to this role here. You could spend a year or two in this role, and you could switch careers and move over, from a logistics side to a marketing side. You need to build those understandings and kind of build that awareness during the hiring conversations. And again, if we're looking at a 12 to 24 month pipeline, just to kind of recruit and identify individuals who might be a fit, it makes more sense to extend that conversation and turn it into more of a career consultation. And again, this just ties into hiring for culture and training for retention. So we really want to look at individuals that have a burning desire to get into your industry. And then from there, we can keep them inside of a larger organization and repurpose them to harness their value. So this gets into how do I repurpose or how do I catalyze that talent, and that's where e-learning really becomes kind of a tool for you to groom your pipeline. Veterans, as we've talked, respond well to structure. They know they kind of have expectations about if I'm delivered a goal to achieve, it's going to come down in a format, and then I'm going to deliver. I'm going to task out the different pieces of that to my team. Using e-learning inside of the veteran experience, they're very familiar with it. So from a kind of an L&D perspective, where we've got to get through certain mandated learning requirements, they're used to doing that. That's something that they're familiar with. When they get to outside of the military, using e-learning as an education requirement. So if they don't have a PMP, I can go handle this PMP. If they don't have digital marketing, I can go handle digital marketing, get up to speed. And then you select and backfill kind of your identified skills gaps that you have with these transitioning veterans once you know your personas, and you can either, whether you have your own academy inside your own organization, but you can identify where you would want them to spend some time to learning so that they come up to speed quicker. That way, while they're on the ground kind of doing, onboarding, once they've made the hire, you can create that more well-rounded candidate at that 6 month to 1 year mark. And again, when we're aligning and managing those expectations, we want to make sure that they understand that. You want to align these education opportunities to their career progression. So if I spend 1 to 2 years in this job role, which they're going to know is a billet, if they finish these education requirements, this is what would be expected to get to the next level. So again, this is also understanding that veteran persona. If I'm going after a non-commissioned officer, so say they've got 6 years in, and say they're in an infantry field, and I've done a little research and I found an infantry guy in my organization in a certain role, and I understand that they're not going to have time to go to college, but I understand that they've also got really dynamic experience in leadership and decision making under stress. I can say, hey, we'll put you in for a year or two in this lower piece. The expectation is that you're going to move through these particular education wickets, whether it's e-learning, whether it's professional certification, whether it's 2 or 4 year degrees, to get to this next level. Managing that expectation on the outset is key. Next slide, please. So hiring military spouses. I just wanted to put in a slide here where when you look at veteran talent, you really want to, wherever you're going to find a veteran, wherever you're going to find an active duty service member, you're going to find military spouses. And that military spouse population has oftentimes a huge professional background. I think it's upwards of 15% have full degrees and have careers that sometimes are put on hold due to traveling with that service member. So if you have opportunities that you're looking to service in areas that might be portable, might be remote, you might have off hours, but you want to tap into this market, understand that there's a huge pool there to be tapped into, and there's all sorts of values with military spouses that are very similar to veterans in that they understand what it means to work for a larger organization. They understand perseverance. And if there's a culture fit there for your organization, you're going to have a lifelong loyal employee, because your company, if you can figure out a way to make it work, can provide stability for that military spouse in terms of career, in terms of job, in terms of professional satisfaction. So it's not a talent pool to be overlooked. And then in closing, really what I'd just like to say is, as you're learning about these veteran personas, as you're targeting them, as Evan had mentioned, you're building a career path, and not just with on-the-job training, but that education piece, but really giving them, solid feedback on, hey, for them individually, where they're going in their career, what needs to happen. And if you have those sorts of conversations, and when you plan internally, have those conversations of, how do I build structures to accept this? It's not a conversation that's far different from the normal pipelines that you're building. You're just repurposing them for veteran consumption, and you're possibly taking other assets to kind of groom them for that. So whether it's e-learning, like something we're doing with Hiring Our Heroes right now is we're managing an internship program. So they've got a corporate fellowship program in place where they've got participating corporate sponsors taking a transitioning veteran and putting them 12 weeks into an internship. And what we're providing with Hiring Our Heroes on the education piece is, since it's across the board and we don't know what role they're going to end up in, we open up the catalog and let the corporate entity say, hey, this professional certification would work good for this veteran to have. And that could be whether brushing up on Excel skills, whether it could be project management, you name it. Creatively using education to groom your pipeline is something that should be considered. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll hand it over to Evan to have a conversation about Verizon.
Thank you, Logan. Thank you very much. Good stuff. And I agree with the approach and your comments there. And so what I wanted to bring here was a high-level overview. So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to sort of go over the main question I get asked a lot about. It's, Evan, what is your approach? What does Verizon do? And I know I shared earlier in terms of sort of a high-level overview of the demographics and the populations that support our military. These are the organizations or people that look at organizations and make decisions based on that engagement. Military is high. If they see Verizon doing something, it is good for business. It's a win-win. But the approach in terms we take, and I always tell people, let's keep it simple, because you could easily overthink things. But our strategic approach is surrounded on 4 anchors, and they are support, engage, attract, and retain. So as an organization, while service members can assimilate into new environments pretty easily, we still wanted to do something specifically that's dedicated to the military audience and make sure that they understood that while they're engaging with us, that there are resources and tools that are here to help them. And as Logan was saying, having these conversations are important. But I want to share with you our approach, because it's the main question I get asked by lots of people in companies, big companies, small companies, is what's your approach? I just want to get a sense of it all. So here it goes. Next slide, please. Support. We want to support service members with jobs. We want to prepare them for careers. We want to do mentorships with them. But we also want to strategically align with veteran service organizations, as one that Logan mentioned, Hiring Our Heroes, among a few that we work with, to help improve the quality of life for the transitioning service member, for the veterans through employment. But we also can insert financial and in-kind technical support. So if you're in a business that can offer these types of in-kind things, whatever it is, you can support them, you can engage them, you can attract them, or you can retain them. You can pick one or two and decide what you want to sort of make it be your thing as an organization. But what we find is that when we integrate our capabilities, let's say Hiring a Hero, since it was brought up, we help provide Wi-Fi support when and where we can on military installations to make sure that the products and tools that are intended to help service members, that they have access to that technology through our Verizon capabilities. Veterans Day Parade, we provided some, free Wi-Fi hotspots. We helped create an app So there are a lot of things that we do that sort of speak volumes as to who we are as a business. And these things are important. And that's how you begin to grow your military talent network. So I think there we go. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. Engage and attract. Now, these are two key ones because it's all about the engagement from the moment you meet with them to the moment they apply to the moment they get hired. So with service members, we want to engage with them anytime we get a chance to. We want to do it through military communities. We do them through our social and national programs, digital platforms, which is pretty cool. I mean, we're actually working in rolling out a wonderful digital mentorship platform that I refer to as the Uber of mentorship. We've got great social media platforms that we leverage, live workshops, hiring, virtual career fairs, as well as hiring events. You need to do these things in order to build trust with the military community. So you're really investing a lot of sweat equity. In the attraction side, so make it simple, right? We want to attract service members, veterans, military spouses, and we do this through a series of engagement and resources that are available to us. And it's amazing how the digital age can connect people. But remember, while having technology is great, don't let that be a hindrance in actually connecting directly with people, because service members, veterans do want to hear from people at companies. So we leverage our strategic partners. If we could identify a newly discovered channel, we will test it out. We can pilot it. If we love it, we'll invest in it. But at the end, for us, is driving traffic to Verizon careers. And if you can get more people to go to your career site, that if you have a good career site for service members and it's easy to follow, you definitely want to direct them there so they get to know a little bit more about your company. Again, but you can use Glassdoor to get that information as well. But the military talent network that we built was created because if we send Logan to a job and there's just nothing there, but we're just not hiring at the moment, we may lose touch with him. So we built the military talent network. So every dollar we spend, we try to get a good return on investment. So now Logan has a place to go to on the military talent network where he can actually hang his resume. But, I would say we should really kind of focus on getting them to the career site so they can see a little bit more about who you are as a business. And while you're there, you may even see a little thing for our military discounts. So it's pretty much a blended approach now that it never was before. Okay, so next slide, and retain. This is the big one, retention. Veteran employees, here's the thing. We want to retain veterans by strategically aligning them with our employee resource groups, who are a group of veterans, referred to them as the Veterans Advisory Board, that engages with newly hired veterans about, invites them to events, they can mentor them, they can have an onboarding buddy, or working with community programs. So if we do stuff out in the street or retail stores, that's another layer where we can leverage in the retail because they're in communities, and other Verizon locations across the country. So it's important that if you're a business that has, let's say offices near installations or things like that, if you can engage with the military community at that level, it goes a long way because they will remember, they're very loyal, and they're going to stick around. And you never know when they're going to take interest and say, I kind of want to work at Verizon. It may not be the thing for me, but I love what they do for our veterans. And I hear this quite often. That informs me that this is actually a good thing. So overall, you want to support, you want to engage, you want to attract, and you want to retain. Those should be the four anchors in which every strategic program that you build or hiring initiative, especially for veterans, should be anchored on. The next slide. And here I like to, for the key takeaways, pass it back to Nina.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Logan. Some great information there. Thank you very much. So we always like to leave our audience with a few key takeaways. So some key takeaways from today. Leverage your internal network. It's very important to use your internal network. Build your brand. Use the veterans within your own organization and make sure you utilize them. Companies that are doing extensive work with hiring veterans, make sure you connect with them and leverage their help to seek out the talent that you're looking for your own organization. Set expectations and provide ongoing education. Knowing what your goals are and knowing how to get that ongoing education for your team within your organization, but also for the veteran population as well, is critically important for the success of your program. And keep it simple. There's no need to have all the bells and whistles when you're starting out. Keep it simple. Know what your goals are, know how you're going to get there, and make sure that you keep to that plan.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Evan, Logan, and Leanne for sharing all of your wonderful information today. We will now open up the floor for questions. So to the audience members, if you have not already submitted a question, please do so now. And for those of you that did ask, we will be sharing out the slide deck and recording with all of you on the line within 24 hours, so be on the lookout for that. So the first question that we have, this one I'm going to direct to both Evan and Logan to take a first stab at. The question is, how do you focus on hiring veterans when you know they may have the right skills but do not meet the degree requirement?
Well, you guys can hear me, right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. All right, good. I thought I was on mute. So that's an interesting question because, right now it's important. So, we value the military experience. And if I heard the question correctly, it was in relation to a degree versus not a degree. What I can tell you is that the military is, by and large, a learning institution, a very technically advanced learning institution. When a service member goes in, they're not just learning, maneuvers, but they're learning a specific skill. At Verizon, there are approximately 85% of jobs within the military that have a similar or direct civilian counterpart. Here at Verizon, we value that experience. We've actually changed some of the wording on our job descriptions that if you don't have a 4-year degree, but you have equivalent military experience, we would encourage you to apply. And there are reasons for that, because sometimes there are reasons for not getting a degree, or maybe you decided to go serve your country first and then get out. But you did learn, and by anything, military is all about training and education. So when they transition out, if they have 4 or 5 years of experience in a specific area that you're looking for, they should not be treated like an entry-level employee. They actually have the skill sets ready. In fact, some other added values that a lot of people don't know about when it comes to improvising, adapting, and overcoming, and what you've learned into the work environment.
To that, I would add understanding military education is key, like Evan just mentioned. So if you took that and you had the internal conversation such that, hey, I'm going to redefine, instead of a 4-year degree requirement, you'd have to have this conversation internally, and you would sell internally. But if I've got a 6-year non-commissioned officer that has met all primary military education PME requirements, that could be a substitute for a 4-year degree. So digging in and understanding what those certifications and what kind of that education on the military side actually means, and defining that veteran target persona, you can have the internal conversation and make an exception based on, and you would, instead of having the 4-year degree requirement, they would have to either have from an enlisted side, a sergeant's course or an advanced ANOC or BNOC if you're looking at an Army folk. And if they have all these pieces on the leadership training side, as well as the experience with that 4 or 6-year requirement, and there are a certain rank requirement on a non-commissioned side, that's a way where you could supplement a 4-year degree requirement with a military experience requirement. But that would require an internal conversation, and that would fit into aligning veteran pathways inside the company.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Evan and Logan. The next question that we have is, can you talk more about the transitional friction that veterans often face when moving from the military to corporate world, and what veteran-friendly companies are doing to reduce that friction?
Hey, Logan, you want to start?
Absolutely. So what we're noticing is the more folks are identifying that the veteran has value, and they're noticing this friction. If you have an existing veteran network, peer-to-peer mentorship is working really well, because then you can have somebody who's already made that transition, whether they've been with the company 2 to 6 years. They can have and it needs to be able to cross-rank, cross everything, and just kind of be a true mentorship network. But you can use existing peer-to-peer networks where they can streamline and manage expectations from a veteran perspective. At the same time, understanding what the company culture is and where those friction points are is something that find a creative way to explore that during the courting process.
Yeah, and let me add to that. So one of the things we're doing at Verizon is really to expand our accessibility to job seekers, to veterans in particular. Because as I said earlier in this webinar, it's about engaging and talking. So we built mechanisms within our career site that if a person is not sure about applying, they can contact one of our military recruiters, who are all comprised of veterans, to connect with them on the West Coast, Central, Northeast, Southeast, if they have questions, because if they do apply for a position, they want feedback. So if we tell them, hey, Logan, I'm sorry, you just weren't a strong fit here, that feedback is so critical to them. So the way we sort of bridge that gap is to make ourselves accessible. They can contact us through Twitter. We have our LinkedIn profiles. We have our faces on our website. And we don't hide. We want to have these conversations, and what we're finding is that through these conversations, we're actually finding great people who we want to bring at Verizon. So it's really about increasing your accessibility and helping these service members who are transitioning out to better understand what are some of the challenges and sort of offer them the best path forward.
Awesome. Thank you both. The next question that we have is directed at you, Logan. The question is, what are some of the best organizations to establish a relationship with when just starting a veteran recruitment initiative?
At the national level, obviously we're heavily engaged with Hiring Our Heroes, but there's military officers, MOA Association. Each Soldier for Life is one on the Army side that's going to be huge. If you look on the Marine side, basically there's going to be a large association associated with each rank, or not rank, but the kind of job. So it could be the Sergeant Majors Association. It could be if you wanted to go after the soft side, the Special Operations side. There's each one has its own foundation. Find bridge programs that are looking at internships, that are looking for placement. So Hiring Our Heroes, the fellowship program is one. The Honor Foundation does a Silicon Valley internship through the Navy SEAL Foundation. Ex Bellum is another one that does some internship programs in the New York area. Those are the ones offhand that I can think of. But finding bridge programs that have internship placements, they're all looking for placement, and that could be a way to pilot. Also, to the previous question about how to get around degree requirements, is if you engage with those folks and you can kind of pilot a program with a fellow or an intern.
Perfect. Thanks, Logan. The next question, Evan, I'm going to direct this one to you. The question is, how do you train hiring managers to understand gaps veterans may have?
Yeah, so so we've done this with recruiters first. We've had these in the past with hiring managers, and we're refining the training because things evolve year over year. So what we tell hiring managers in particular, as part of the learning, is we actually invite them to come to hiring fairs with us. We invite them to our virtual career fairs. We find that direct engagement with a service member really does a lot. So from a training perspective, while we can sit on a webinar and talk about different things, one of the big things that we do is actually involve them and say, hey, would you like to be a mentor? Hey, would you like to come with us to a hiring event? Hey, we're doing this thing over here at a networking event. Would you like to come? This way, they're learning it directly and understanding this population. And when they realize, wow, they're pretty impressive. But on the training side, we like to cover a high-level view in terms of why we do what we do, and then we get granular in terms of, why do we engage with veterans. So the way we, is we first like to ask questions. So what are your concerns about hiring someone in the military? And if they say, well, we don't think they have applicable skill sets to us, then that's a learning opportunity. And then we sort of go over the veteran engagement. We do a training which we refer to as the value of military experience. We even created an infographic that explains why we do what we do and explains how the skill sets of the service members are applicable in business. About 85% of jobs in the military have a direct civilian counterpart here at Verizon. And so we start to really have a high-level conversation that, they're not foreign. They're just trained differently. They come from a different culture, but that culture that they come from, it's bred to succeed. They're mission driven. They want outcomes. They want to be challenged. So there's a lot of things from ability to learning to adapt, leadership, teamwork. So the question is, we ask them, what do you look for in the candidates that you hire? Everything they say, our response is, well, that's exactly what the military trains for. And then we just sort of get into a dialogue and sort of break it down through the training program and give examples of someone even on my team who never worked in recruitment, 21 years in the Army, and then they sort of grew from there and sort of expanded their learning base as, the longer they stayed with the business.
Perfect. Thanks, Evan. So it looks like we are at the top of the hour, so at this time we will close out the presentation. If we did not get to your question, we will do our best to get you those answers and connect sharing all information for us. It was super insightful and very valuable. And again, I'd like to thank